I'm here with Rene Matić.
Hello.
Hello. And we are here to talk about this absolutely fabulous photograph by Nan Goldin of Misty and Joey, taken in Berlin in 1992. Colours are amazing. The brightness of the blue wig, contrasting with Misty's glittery top, it's amazing.
And the lipstick and everything. You can see
every detail.
Every single detail, yeah. It's kind of incredible to see up close.
It's a really good example of, I think, Nan's approach to photography, which is you've got this very kind of formal portrait of Misty, and Misty's got this, very, very defiant, very direct gaze, but then Joey's in the background and is just sort of disappearing out of shot. So it sort of represents these two very considered parts of Goldin's practice, which is this formal portraiture, but also this like intimate, candid moment with Joey kind of just leaving the frame. I think Nan is probably one of the most influential artists of our generation. She pioneers this diaristic aesthetic and this kind of snapshot looking type of photography. She writes a lot of diaries around this time, but this is the sort of diary that she says that she lets you read, which I think is a really powerful way of thinking about photography. Yeah. She went to art school, so she knew all about the kind of histories of photography and how they related, but she wasn't interested in using those techniques in her style because she was making work about her community. And she's not really interested in technology or process. It's more about the practicalities of having a small camera that she can be intimate with.
I think it's the urgency, isn't it, of the image that is what makes her and sets her apart from everything else. It's like this immediacy that she needs to document what's going on in front of her, and therefore it's not necessary to pick the right camera or the right process or the right, I don't know, even lighting even. And that's what, has always drawn me to her work, I think.
She wanted to create, visibility for marginalised individuals. So many of her friends and family and loved ones died in the process of, making the work over, the last kind of 20, 30 years. I suspect for Goldin to look back on these works, it's an act of remembrance and it's an act of memorialising these really special, intimate relationships that she had. She was heavily influenced by her upbringing, quite conservative, middle-class Jewish family. Unfortunately, her sister dies when she's quite young. Her sister had been in and out of institutions for most of Nan's childhood and dies by suicide at the age of 18 when Nan is 11 years old. And I think a lot of her work is deeply influenced by this, traumatic period. She leaves home quite early, 14, 15, and goes to live with the drag community in Boston. And this is where she, develops a desire to make art. This is where she develops, the photographs of that community and how that sort of interacts with her life.
Well, in the beginning of Ballad of Sexual Dependency, in the book she writes about that's basically just losing her sister is why she never wanted to lose anyone ever again, and she hasn't. And we've gained so many characters from her work too.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you see the same characters appear again and again.
And they become icons.
Yeah.
Misty, she appears again and again and again. And she's always kind of fabulous.
I think Goldin talks very eloquently about this idea about her wanting to see these people in the way that she saw them, which was beautiful and courageous. Yeah. And I think that it's the courage that she really admires.
Yeah. I think a lot of photographers, I suppose there's like an element of voyeurism and being outside of the situation that you're capturing, but Nan's so inside it. You don't even really see a camera there. You just see her standing in front of Misty, I think. Yeah. And that's what I've always wanted to do with my work, always remind the audience that I was the person there that was looking first and ask the audience that they look through me to see this person that I'm looking at. And I think that's a big element of protection as well, to protect the people that are in the photos because they're very vulnerable people, And I think that this image, for me, is so important because the amount of safety that goes on in this image is so important, it's so rare. What you're seeing now, I believe, is the before the club or the after the club. We talk about it in the queer community as like getting from A to B, right? So this is either A or B. And the in-between part of that is a really, really violent, problematic oppressive place. Being outside on the street, I'm saying, for this person, this body. But this here is like this safe zone. And I think that Nan did a really good job of showing when they were safe with each other. I think that one of the things that I've spoken about before is not to presume that everyone thinks that these people are beautiful and that these images are beautiful. Of course, we think this because, you know, we're allies or we're part of the communities ourselves, or we're just like not assholes. And at this time specifically, yeah, that really wasn't the case. And still to this day, it isn't always the case.
Originally, it was this slideshow that she would make for her friends. This was the time where, you know, she's operating at the Bowery and she's in and out of East Village, she's drinking in bars, and that's the way that she's showing the work. So it's this constantly evolving thing, but I think at one point it ends up being, you know, sort of around about 700 images.
But the ballad isn't just about the glamour of navigating New York, it's also about, yeah, this other side and the intimate side. It's everything. It's not just nightlife, you know, which I think is important to say, because what I'm saying is, in terms of the queer narrative, it's like we only exist at night. And actually what Nan does is brings it into the daytime, morning, noon, night. I mean, undoubtedly she's had an incredible influence on my work. So I started taking pictures in a similar way. I'm not trained. I don't even really know what my cameras are called or how they work. But there was that urgency and this really like longing to see the self. I've always wanted to be an artist, always have been an artist, and the photography kind of felt like research almost. And then once I had been taking photos since like 2018, like 3 years worth of archiving one's life, it became something. There was a narrative all of a sudden. And so once I was able to see that and see that life and that world, I realized that there was something to that. I was thinking about it recently, about this burden of representation and being queer or being black or being non-binary and having this kind of thrust upon you that you must be an advocate or represent, you know, these huge, diverse communities. It's impossible. What I've decided is what I want to represent and have the burden of representing Britishness, which is never, you know, I've never been asked to do that, and nor do people want me to do that. It's about country, and it's about patriotism and love and care, but it's about being patriotic for the people and the people around me and the chosen family and what that looks like. And in a similar way, the same people crop up throughout the years in my photos. It's just life, so it's the same kind of thing, but we're in a different era.
Definitely think that there is something about, like, you know, you kind of picking up where Nan sort of leaves off with this kind of very contemporary take on this idea about community and care. I mean, I think that that's where I see the parallels. And I wonder if also you're thinking about kind of, in the same way that, you know, perhaps Goldin is looking to do with Misty, is to, you know, visualize and celebrate and say, you know, these people are here, we exist.
We exist and you matter to me. I like to bring myself into the work a lot in the same way that Nan did with self-portraits, because it does that same thing of putting you on the same level as the people in your photos, you know. I think that one thing that is different, the people in Nan's photographs are extremely vulnerable with her, and I think I don't feel such a need to do that. I have less control over the narrative of my photos because of the ways the images circulate now. They are everywhere and they can go far and wide with the internet. And I think having a bit of vulnerability is I put myself in that position, but not necessarily my friends, or try not to, you know. I like the backstage. I think that Nan wanted that backstage to be shown because it was like, you know, in this darkness, it didn't exist.
You're right, that it was a different time. And it was perhaps, you know, like, communities or situations that we hadn't been exposed to.
Yeah.
And she talks a lot about not wanting to make the invisible visible, but she talks about how the wrong things get hidden.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why you see a lot of rawness in the images that she takes that perhaps we wouldn't take now. There is a kind of sensationalism around the situations that Nan chooses to photograph that perhaps you might feel differently about.
Well, there
now.
was a necessity to do that, and I think that there is, but you know, conversations have changed, not necessarily moved on, but we're definitely talking about things more, and I'm concerned with keeping a positivity, I think, for myself. That's my way of surviving, because this is what it is. This is why we make work. It's just survival. And I learned early on that if I was going to be this angry or have this pressure and like violence thrust upon me, then the only way that I can get through that is through loving. And I want to keep that at the forefront of the work. And it's just for myself. I don't feel an urgency to show in that way, I think, for an audience. It is always back to the self and my friends.